Hey everyone. So every single day, right, we get these huge numbers thrown at us about the economy. But what do they actually mean? Like, how do you even measure something as massive as a country's entire economy? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down today. We're going to build that toolkit together.
Yeah, I'm talking about GDP, GNP, national income, all these acronyms you see in the news. We're going to pull back the curtain on all of them so you'll know exactly what they're telling us. And honestly, it's way more straightforward than it sounds.
Okay, but first things first. Before we can start measuring, we have to agree on what we're actually measuring. So let's just ask the basic question. What is an economy anyway?
When you boil it all down, it's just a system. That's all it is. It's the system a country has for making stuff, getting that stuff to everyone, and then, how we all use it. That's the whole shebang. Making it, moving it, using it.
You can almost picture it as this big, non-stop loop, right? Things get made, that's production. Then they get shipped out to stores or online, that's distribution. And finally, we buy them and use them, that's consumption. This cycle just keeps going, and that's the engine we're trying to measure.
All right, so let's grab the first and, let's be honest, the most famous tool in our toolkit. I'm pretty sure you've heard of this one, gross domestic product, or as literally everyone calls it, GDP. Now, the key word here, the one you absolutely have to remember, is within. GDP is all about geography, location, 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 and measures everything produced inside a country's borders during a certain time. Oh, and see that word final? That's also super important. It means we only count the finished product, not the individual parts used to make it. We'll circle back to why in a bit.
And this is exactly what I mean by location being key. It really doesn't matter who owns the company. If a foreign car company has a factory in your country, the value of the cars made in that factory counts towards your country's GDP. Why? Because the factory is physically in the country.
Okay, but here's where it gets a little more interesting. There are actually two ways to calculate that big GDP number. First, you've got nominal GDP. This one just uses today's prices. But what if prices are just going up? That's where real GDP comes in. It's the smart one. It adjusts for inflation to give us a much clearer picture. And that is exactly why you'll always hear economists talking about real GDP. By taking inflation out of the equation, it shows us if the country is actually making more cars, providing more services, producing more stuff. It's the true measure of economic growth, not just price growth.
All right, let's switch gears a bit. We're going to pick up our next tool, and this one asks a slightly different question. It's called Gross National Product, or GNP. And with GNP, we're shifting our focus from where stuff is made to who is making it.
So, if GDP was all about location, GNP is all about ownership or nationality. It adds up all the value produced by a country's citizens and its companies, no matter where in the world they're located. Think of it this way. It follows the passport, not the map. And the formula to get it is actually pretty cool. You start with the GDP, everything made inside the borders. Then you add all the money that your country's citizens made working overseas, and you subtract the money that foreign citizens made working inside your country. Simple as that.
This little table really nails the difference, doesn't it? GDP is about location. What was produced here? GNP is about ownership. What did our citizens produce? And this difference can tell a really interesting story about a country. Take the Philippines, for example. It has millions of citizens working all over the world, sending money back home. So its GNP can be way bigger than its GDP. On the flip side, look at a country like Ireland. It's home to the European HQs for a ton of huge foreign tech companies. So all that production happens in Ireland, making its GDP much larger than its GNP.
So we've got these massive numbers, GDP and GNP. They're telling us about the country as a whole. But that GNP number, the one about what the people of a country produce, kind of leads us to the next obvious question, right? How does all that money actually get divided up among the people?
And that's where this idea of national income comes into play. It's pretty much what it sounds like. The grand total of all the income everybody in the country earned. We're talking wages, company profits, rent, all of it. It's the whole economic pie for the nation's citizens.
So if you want to figure out the size of an average slice of that pie, the math is super simple. You just take that giant national income number and divide it by the number of people in the country. And voila, you have what's called per capita income.
And that number, per capita income, is a really powerful snapshot. It's often used as a quick way to gauge the average standard of living. But, and this is a big but, You have to remember it's just an average. It doesn't tell you anything about how that income is distributed. It doesn't tell you if one person has 90% of the pie and everyone else is fighting over the last 10%. It's a useful starting point for sure, but it's not the final word on inequality.
Okay, that was a lot, I know. So let's do a quick recap. A little lightning round to make sure all these key ideas are locked in and to clear up any confusion.
First up, the big one. If you remember one thing, remember this. GDP is geography, what's made inside the country. GNP is nationality, what's made by the country's citizens wherever they are.
Second point. From now on, whenever you see a news headline talking about economic growth, your first thought should be, are they using real GDP? Because that's the only one that's been adjusted for inflation and tells you if we're really producing more.
And last but not least, a super important detail about how they calculate GDP. It's designed to avoid counting the same thing twice. So they only count the price of the final product, like the car you buy at the dealership. They don't count the tires when the tire company sells them to the car factory because the value of those tires is already included in the final price of the car. Makes sense, right?
So there you have it. You've now got the core toolkit for understanding these big economic numbers. But it's important to remember that's what they are, numbers. They tell a really powerful story about production and income, for sure, but they don't capture everything about a country's well-being. Things like happiness, the health of the environment, or all the valuable work people do that they don't get paid for. So the question I want to leave you with is this: what parts of the